got 5 years in prison for firing celebratory shots at his own party rally. But here's the twist. This isn't just about gun laws. It's about whether one of Africa's most controversial leaders can be silenced by the courts. Today, we're breaking down Julius Malema's shocking sentencing in South Africa, what it reveals about the country's justice system, and how this could reshape the entire political landscape. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why this case matters far beyond South Africa's borders and what it tells us about democracy in action. Let me bring in someone who's been following this story closely. Help me understand, who exactly is Julius Malema and why does this sentence matter so much?
Julius Malema is basically South Africa's most polarizing politician. He's the 45-year-old leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters, the country's fourth biggest party. Think of him as this firebrand leftist who calls for seizing white-owned land and nationalizing mines.
And he just got sentenced to 5 years for what exactly?
So, back in 2018, during his party's 5th anniversary celebration, there's this video that went viral of Malema firing a semi-automatic rifle into the air in front of about 20,000 supporters. The court found him guilty of unlawful possession of a firearm and discharging a weapon in public.
Wait, he claimed the gun was a toy, right?
Exactly. His defense was that it was just celebratory, that the gun didn't even belong to him, and he was just trying to energize the crowd. But Magistrate Toinette Olivier wasn't buying it. She said, and I quote, "It wasn't an impulsive act, it was the event of the evening."
That's a pretty damning statement from the judge. What were prosecutors asking for?
They wanted 15 years. Prosecutor Joel Cesar argued that Malema is a political leader with a huge following and that young people emulate this kind of behavior. They basically said he's a lawmaker who breaks the law.
15 years down to 5, that's still a massive sentence. But here's what I find fascinating. His lawyers immediately appealed, and he walked out of court that same day.
Right, and that's the key detail everyone's missing. Under South African law, he stays free pending appeal. But if this sentence stands after all appeals are exhausted, he's automatically disqualified from Parliament. Any sentence over 12 months without the option of a fine kicks you out.
So this is basically a constitutional crisis waiting to happen?
Absolutely. According to the page content, this falls under Section 47 of the Constitution. If upheld, Malema loses his seat and gets disqualified from serving in public office for 5 years. For the leader of the fourth biggest party, that's political death.
And the timing couldn't be worse for him, right? We're heading into 2026 local government elections.
Exactly. Malema himself said this is part of a broader campaign to stifle the EFF's influence ahead of the 2026 local government elections. He's claiming there's a hidden hand of imperialism and capital behind this.
Hidden hand? That sounds pretty conspiracy-minded.
Well, here's where it gets interesting. The case was actually brought by AfriForum, which the page content describes as a right-wing lobbying group that represents Afrikaners. They've been at odds with Malema for years, especially over his chanting of "kill the Boer" at rallies.
Wait, kill the Boer? That sounds pretty inflammatory.
It's actually an old anti-apartheid song, and the courts ruled last year that it's not hate speech and wasn't meant to be taken literally. But it shows you the kind of rhetoric Malema uses that gets people fired up on both sides.
So we've got this polarizing figure who built his career on radical politics, and now the courts might end it. What was the scene like outside the courthouse?
Hundreds of his red-clad EFF supporters gathered outside, chanting and singing revolutionary songs. When they heard he could appeal, they started calling out in Xhosa Sigoduka Naye, which translates to, "We are leaving with him today."
That's such a powerful image. But let's talk about Malema's response. How did he handle this?
He was defiant as always. Standing in court in a dark suit and red tie, he showed little emotion during sentencing. But afterward, he called Magistrate Olivier a racist of note and claimed she doesn't apply the law.
Those are pretty serious accusations against a sitting magistrate.
Absolutely. He said she speaks politics instead of reading, and that no reasonable judge would agree that a person who shoots one bullet should be sentenced to 5 years. He's basically claiming the entire process is politically motivated.
But the magistrate pushed back on that, didn't she?
Yes, Olivier specifically said the sentence was based solely on his actions on the day, and stressed that it is not a political party who has been convicted here, it is a person, an individual. She was trying to depoliticize it.
And she had some pretty stark words about gun violence, right?
Exactly. She said, "We hear daily or weekly of children playing in the front yards, in the street, who are caught in crossfire, random shots fired, killing people. It's just the first time that we hear it's being called celebratory shots.
That really puts it in perspective. South Africa has serious gun violence issues, and here's a political leader treating firearms like party props.
Right, and that's what makes this case so complex. On one hand, you have legitimate concerns about gun safety and political accountability. On the other, you have questions about whether this is really about justice or political warfare.
Let's talk about the bigger picture here. Who is Julius Malema politically, and why does he have such a devoted following?
Malema started as the youth leader of the African National Congress, that's the ruling party, but he got kicked out after a falling out with then-President Jacob Zuma and formed the EFF in response.
And the EFF has been eating into the ANC's support?
Absolutely. The page content says that with Malema's calls for seizing white-owned land and transferring wealth to the black majority, the EFF ate away at the ANC share of the vote. They became the fourth largest party in the 2024 elections.
So he's tapping into real frustrations about inequality?
Exactly. According to the Straits Times reporting, his platform is built around advocating for the rights of South Africans who feel left out of the country's post-apartheid prosperity. He attracts millions of black youths facing unemployment in a country where 1 in 3 people are jobless.
That's a massive constituency. No wonder his supporters see this as an attack on their movement.
Right, and here's what's really interesting. Political analyst Ralph Mateka said, for him now, it might just be the end of the road. The party had no plan regarding succession. It is difficult to imagine the EFF without Malema.
So this isn't just about one politician. It could reshape the entire opposition landscape?
Potentially, yes. But here's the counter-argument. Another analyst, Sandile Swana, said the case may not end Malema's leadership, and that even a conviction or prison sentence would not automatically remove him as party leader.
So he could still lead the party from outside parliament?
Theoretically, yes. Swana called it an inconvenience, but politically it doesn't have too much consequence. He pointed out that South Africa's political history shows leaders can retain or even grow support after legal setbacks.
That's fascinating. It reminds me of how some politicians become martyrs through persecution.
Exactly, and Malema is leaning into that narrative. After his conviction in October, he told supporters that going to prison or death is a badge of honor, and we cannot be scared of prison or to die for the revolution.
Revolutionary language. But let's be real about the appeals process. How long could this drag out?
Years, potentially. He's already said he'll take this all the way to South Africa's Constitutional Court if necessary. And remember, he stays free and keeps his parliamentary seat until all appeals are exhausted.
So we could be looking at this playing out through multiple election cycles?
Absolutely. And that's probably exactly what Malema wants, to keep this in the headlines, to keep portraying himself as a victim of political persecution, and to rally his base around the idea that the system is rigged against them.
There's something almost theatrical about all this. The red-clad supporters, the revolutionary songs, the defiant speeches.
That's Malema's brand. He's nicknamed Juju by his supporters, and he's always been this charismatic, outspoken figure who knows how to work a crowd. The gun incident itself was described as the event of the evening. It was political theater.
But theater with real consequences. What does this tell us about the state of South African democracy?
It's a stress test, really. You have the judiciary trying to apply the rule of law equally, regardless of political status. But you also have legitimate questions about whether the legal system is being weaponized against opposition figures.
And the fact that it was AfriForum who brought the case adds another layer of complexity.
Exactly. Here you have a group representing Afrikaner interests going after a black radical politician who calls for land redistribution. The optics alone are explosive in post-apartheid South Africa.
It's like the past and present are colliding in this courtroom.
And that's what makes this case so significant beyond just South Africa. It's about whether young democracies can handle polarizing figures through legal institutions rather than political violence.
Speaking of broader implications, what does this mean for other African countries watching this unfold?
It's a crucial test case. If South Africa's institutions can handle this fairly and transparently, it sends a message that the rule of law can work even with controversial figures. If it's seen as political persecution, it undermines faith in democratic institutions.
And we're seeing this play out in real time, with Malema's supporters already claiming it's a witch hunt.
Right. And the EFF has been mobilizing through what they call night vigils and public demonstrations. They're characterizing this as lawfare, using the legal system to neutralize a political opponent.
That's a term we're hearing more and more in democracies around the world.
Exactly. And it puts the judiciary in an impossible position. They have to balance applying the law fairly while avoiding the perception of political interference. That's why this case matters so much.
So when you step back from all the drama and political theater, what's really at stake here?
It's about whether South Africa's democratic institutions are strong enough to handle polarizing figures through legal processes rather than political violence, and whether the constitution can actually disqualify powerful politicians when they break the law.
And the answer to that question will shape not just South African politics, but how other young democracies handle similar challenges.
Absolutely. This case is being watched across Africa and beyond. It's a test of whether democratic institutions can survive when they're used against charismatic populist leaders who claim to represent the people against the system.
Here's what strikes me most about this story. Julius Malema walked into that courtroom knowing exactly what he was doing. The appeal was filed within minutes, the supporters were mobilized, the narrative was ready.
Right, and that tells you this is far from over. Whether he wins or loses in the courts, Malema has already won the political narrative battle with his base. They see him as a martyr fighting an unjust system.
And that might be the most important outcome of all. Thanks for joining us on